Well, we're joined here in the studio by the UKIP MEP and prominent Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage. Nigel, what did you make of Jeremy Corbyn's speech? Is it a game changer?
It's the first step of a, I think, quite easy to see complete Labour sellout on the SCM. It's perfectly clear. I mean, the nonsense about trade. Governments don't negotiate trade deals. The European Commission negotiate trade deals. If you're part of a customs union, you will not be involved in that. So they've given up on that. And what Barnier will say is, well, thank you very much. That's great. We're very happy with this. But you now need to go further on the single market. So the next big Labour speech on this a few months down the road will be, that we'll be inextricably linked to a single market, but not the single market. I thought the biggest clue of the lot was yesterday on the BBC when Starmer said, we will have to have a new treaty. So we get rid of the current treaty, we have another treaty, and Labour voters are going to start to ask, are we really leaving?
Lisa Nandy, would you like to see Labour commit to remaining members of the single market?
I think, broadly speaking, we're in exactly the right place for the country.
But what about the answer to that question?
Well, that is the answer to that question, is that the position that Jeremy just set out about an hour ago was building on the commitment that Keir made yesterday about a customs union rather than the customs union, access to the single market rather than membership of the single market.
Well, we can all have access to the single market.
Because, as Rebecca outlined, it gives you flexibility to be able to negotiate specific terms, rules and agreements that you want to sign up to and those that you don't. I mean, for me, the importance of all of this that is being lost in all the sort of bluster and hot air is that Labour does now have a very clear position, which is that we see our future as being a high-wage, high-standard, high-quality economy that links us very closely, pegs us very closely to those standards that operate across the European Union.
Right, but Labour's policy would mean Britain would be a rule taker, and you accept that, and that is where you would be selling levers down the line.
No, that's part of the negotiation. And the difficulty for Britain is that there isn't that agreement within the Tory party, even within the Cabinet. So, the question is, because this is a choice, really, in the end, is do we want to peg ourselves very closely to countries like the US and China and trade on those terms, which will push down wages in constituencies like mine, or do we want to peg ourselves much more closely to the EU?
Sorry, Nigel. Was open door immigration,
you've had quite a lot to say.
Hang on. I'm going to come to you on immigration in a moment. Let me come to Chris Gibble. What do you say to that? I mean, are you confident that you will still be able to get Parliament to endorse leaving the single market and the customs union?
Well, I think, first of all, this is about taking back control. People voted in June 2016 to have control over their money, their laws and their borders, and that 2/3 of Labour constituencies voted to leave. They will be outraged if they feel that our future trade policy is going to be set by the EU. The whole point of having a customs union...
No, that's not true.
The whole point of having a customs union means that it will exclude the ability for Britain to be able to sign independently up to the trade terms it wishes to do so. And when people realise that, when people realise that a customs union will lead to this, I think there's going to be serious consequences to the Labour Party of eroding its base.
Right. I mean, Nigel Farage, your party got just under 600,000 votes in the last election. That's against 17.4 million people who voted to leave, as well as all of those, of course, who voted to remain. Why do you still get to define what a proper Brexit looks like?
Nah, look, the party got very few votes because the public believed parties like Labour that actually the Brexit they voted for was going to happen. And now, a few months down the road, we're seeing a very different picture.
There are
4 million plus Labour voters who voted for Corbyn, who genuinely want immigration reduced significantly and want us to leave the single market, the customs union, and to be an independent country. So this is a sellout by any measure.
But you've always said that Jeremy Corbyn was a Brexiteer. Why wouldn't people trust him to deliver the sort of Brexit that will protect jobs and the economy, as he has stated?
Well, because, as I say, if we continue with free movement, he's made it pretty clear this morning...
They said an end to free movement.
Well, he said he wants to be a citizen of the world. He said we won't scapegoat anybody. I mean, there were so many references there. And he also said Labour's priority will be business commitments, not arbitrary migration numbers. So all this will continue, and we will, low-paid jobs. That's right, and that's what Labour have produced for us over the years.
Let Lisa respond.
Well, just this is absolute nonsense. If it was as true as you say that you somehow magically know exactly why every single Leave voter in this country voted to leave and the specific legal mechanisms that they want to see in place afterwards, then why did your vote collapse in constituencies like mine in 2017?
Because we got Brexit. Brexit.
We stood on a very clear manifesto
Yes,
that
leave
said
the
we
single
wanted
market,
a high wage,
take back
high
borders.
quality
Let her
economy.
don't talk over
We
each other.
didn't, though. We didn't. We
was in
stood
the
on
manifesto.
we stood on a very clear commitment that said that we wanted to retain the benefits of the single market. We wanted access to the single
Everyone's
market.
got
We
access.
wanted to avoid a hard border with Northern Ireland.
All right, we'll come
which
on to that
matters
hard border. We will
my
come to the hard
constituents
border.
as much as it does to people in Northern
Let's
Ireland.
just talk about
frankly.
immigration. What do you understand by Rebecca Long-Bailey and what was said in the Labour manifesto, that there will be an end to freedom of movement, which is then followed by a new system, a fairer system, says Jeremy Corbyn, of managed migration?
Well, I'm not part of the discussion internally behind the scenes.
But what does it mean to you?
What I imagine that this would mean, and where I imagine this is leading to, whether it's Tories negotiating it or Labour, is probably a system that looks a lot like work permits and visas, looking at the requirements to bring in skilled labour and non-skilled labour.
And with the numbers coming
specific
down or
sectors
not?
like the agricultural industry. Well, I think that's a bit of a red herring, to be honest, because if you start saying we'll set some kind of arbitrary target for numbers, then you're not looking at the interests of the economy.
Right. I mean, in terms of knowing what people actually wanted about leaving the European Union, are you saying that there are going to be tens of thousands of very disappointed Labour leavers, that we're not going to be leaving the customs union if Labour...
No, millions. Millions of Labour voters, very disappointed. I mean, this actually is the Conservative Party's big chance. If the Conservative Party, if Theresa May was able, right now, to grab the immigration agenda, I think she could do massive damage to Labour in the Midlands and the North. I'm not sure whether she'll do it, but everybody was clear. We were voting to leave the institutions of the European Union and run our own lives.
Nobody voted for lower wages.
That is what. Well, they're going to get higher. Well, actually, they're going to get higher wages if we control immigration.
Right.
And if we go global, we could be a
Don't talk
richer
over.
country. What you've done today, you've stopped us going global by staying part of a customs union.
Right, and that does mean,
That is
I mean, you say it would be in a negotiation, but it does mean, on paper, that Britain would remain a rule taker if we are part of a customs union. There wouldn't be the ability to negotiate free trade agreements in the way that people envisaged, and that is going back on what was promised in the referendum.
No, there would be restrictions on the way in which we could negotiate free trade
Right.
agreements, but it wouldn't prevent us from negotiating.
Well, except
free
on the
trade
basis of being
agreements.
friendlier to the
What it
EU
would-
and being friendly in negotiations is not evidence for saying that the EU would give you what you want.
No, but what it would entail, as Keir rightly was honest about yesterday, is that we would have to work very closely with other European countries in order to negotiate free trade agreements. Now, the truth is, sorry, Nigel, you've had a lot to say about this. Most of it nonsense.
Let her finish, and I'll come back to you.
And the truth,
Nigel.
the truth is,
You're not telling the truth.
you're not telling the truth.
The European Commission negotiates
You've had
the
a lot
EU's
to
trade
say.
deals.
Right, you've
Not
said
one
that.
word of it.
Let her-
Not one
let
word
her
of it
speak.
has
40
been
years.
true. It's
For
nonsense.
40 years
and
that's been the case.
the truth is that this is a choice in the end about what sort of country we want to be. We cannot be simultaneously a high wage, high regulation economy and a low wage, low regulation economy. We have to choose if we want a close trading relationship with Europe or not, and that's why neither of these political
All right.
parties is being honest with the British public.
Before I come to you, one of the other issues is about state aid, which is an important cornerstone of what Jeremy Corbyn wants to do if he becomes Prime Minister in terms of economic policy. Labour wants to undermine the principle of no state aid, which is a principle that is crucial to the internal EU market. Why and how?
Well, actually, I disagree with that, and I slightly disagree with Rebecca in the way that it was characterised in that interview, because the truth is that if you look at countries like France, it is just simply not true to say that remaining within the European Union is a barrier to state aid. And in
So that's
fact,
a straw
it is-
man put up by the Labour
No, I don't think
Party.
it is. I think it's a genuine fear, but one that is actually, in my view, not fully borne out by the facts. I think it is possible to remain within the European Union. Not that we're leaving, but it is possible to do that and intervene in markets. So I don't think that that is a consideration that should determine any political party's policy.
Nigel Farage, you were stating very clearly earlier that the Commission is the one that is negotiating here. But it's also true to say that other countries have had bespoke deals. I mean, if you look at Turkey with regard to the customs union, or you look at Switzerland with regard to bilaterals.
We were talking in the context there, Joe, of doing trade deals with the rest of the world. And it is the European Commission that does that. Actually, even as members of the European Union governments don't have that much say over it. So you cannot be in a customs union and exert very much influence on outside trade policy. That's a fact. However, I think what is very, very interesting, there's one thing for certain if we stay in a customs union: food will stay expensive, because the other thing that a customs union does, it determines the tariffs that are put on imports from the rest of the world on items like shoes, food, bras, the things actually that the poorest families spend the biggest part of their incomes on. Those things will stay expensive if we stay in a customs union, and that's something that Labour voters need to understand.
What do you say to that? Because it was also a line from Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Tory MP.
But essentially what Nigel's arguing for is a vision of Britain in which wages in constituencies like mine fall, and that means that, relatively speaking, prices are higher anyway. So I think the idea that UKIP are suddenly the champion...
Cheaper food would be
the
a good
champion
thing
of the
for those,
poor
for those on lower incomes.
is not true.
Food reduced by £20 a week for those on lower incomes for an average family would be a very good
And
thing.
Nigel, what I would say to you is that actually that is the difference between the customs union and a customs union, which you just mixed up in that answer. Because a customs union enables you to negotiate.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
You're either part of a legal entity called a customs union, or you're not.
And that is also part of the argument around the single market.
And Lisa, now, would you not accept... I mean, Keir Starmer implied that, in effect, it would be the customs union.
No, a customs
Well,
union.
in effect, it would be as close.
I see what you mean. So we're looking to mirror very closely those terms so that we can have frictionless trade and help to move us forward to solving the problem that we've created in Northern Ireland. And that seems to me to be a thoroughly good thing.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeremy Corbyn's shift in direction on Brexit has stoked speculation that the government could be defeated